This is Michael Woodward, and this is episode 62 of the Jumblethink podcast.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink podcast, a podcast focused on telling the stories of dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers. Along the way, we give you some tips and ideas of how you can chase your own big ideal or dream and create the world you want to live in. Our guest today is Laura Meoli. More about Laura in a moment. On Monday's episode, our guest is PJ Jonas. She is a business owner, goat wrangler, entrepreneur, mom. She wears so many different hats. She's been featured on The Today Show, The Doctors, The Huckabee Show, the Oprah Magazine, and so many other crazy places. Her company is called Goat Milk Stuff. Really cool company, and her story of how she created it is truly an amazing adventure. Make sure to check out Monday's episode with PJ Jonas. We want to make sure that you never miss another Jumblethink podcast, and the best way to do that is to subscribe to the podcast. Now, we can be found at Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, and so many other incredible places where you may listen to your podcast. Simply go to wherever you like to listen to podcasts, search for Jumblethink, and subscribe. You can also swing on over to jumblethink.com/podcast and click on the links to some of the most favorite places where podcasts are found. Now let's jump into today's interview with Laura Meoli. I am super excited about today's guest. Her name is Laura Meoli. She is a filmmaker, educator, and podcast host. She is a creative entrepreneur with multiple interests, and she's in a journey she's calling the Freelance experiment. Her projects have won Emmys, Tellys, and been featured in numerous film festivals. Part of the conversation we have today, we talk about figuring out what is important to you. It's such a critical part of being a dreamer, maker, innovator, and influencer. If you don't know what you value, if you don't know what's important to you, then how can you really make the steps to chase your dreams? It's a really cool conversation. So let's jump into the interview I had with Laura Meoli. Laura, it is so much of a privilege to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Isn't that what everyone says?
I think so.
No, but it really is great to be on your podcast.
I appreciate that. You are doing some exciting things and on a new journey, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I am a podcast host. I host the Louder Vision podcast for creative people. I'm also a filmmaker and an educator. So I like to bridge the gap between the technical side of filmmaking, digital media creation, and also the education part where I work with clients to teach them what they need in order to share that content, because that's a huge part of our business, is not only just making something, but being able to share it with the world, making it work for you. So I like to not only teach that to business owners, but I also teach little kids once in a while.
That's awesome. That's a lot of fun. When we were first dialoguing via email, one of the things you said that stood out to me is that you're a creative entrepreneur with multiple interests.
Yep.
What does that mean, and what does that look like?
I like to call myself a variety seeker. When I come up with my ideal job, like everyone has this idea of what is the perfect job for them, what does their ideal day look like. For me, I like to think of that in like a week span, because I don't want every single day to look the same. I don't want to be doing the same exact thing every single day. I have multiple interests, be it my podcasts, films, video, graphic design, writing, painting, all these different art forms that I like to do, but I don't want to do the same thing every day. That is my goal. I love to meet people. I am on this. There's a spectrum of introvert, extrovert.
Okay.
I am in the middle. So there are some days when I don't want to talk to anybody, and then there's days where I want to go out and I want to meet people and be super extroverted. So I don't like every day to be the same, and I like to use all of my talent, all of my skills in these different ways. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. In that journey of that creative endeavor, keeping it fresh, changing it up, painting one day, creating a film another day, maybe doing a shoot one day, and then the next day doing editing. How do you go into that process with a focus of saying, this week, these are the things I want to accomplish, and this is how I want to schedule it out? Or do you freeform that a little bit more? How do you kind of build your life around these different creative endeavors and things don't get like lost in that shuffle?
That's a big thing that I'm learning. As I just in May of 2017 is when I gave up my full-time job and said, I'm going to be a full-time entrepreneur, focus on my business completely. That has been the number one struggle for me, and the number one thing that I'm still trying to figure out, what is the best method for me in terms of how do I make sure that nothing falls through the cracks? How do I make sure that I get to everything in time? And I definitely do that, but there are definitely some days when I do a lot more than I do the next day. And so I'm trying to make a little more of a balance for myself in terms of these are the hours I work, versus these are the days that I'm off. And when you work from home, it's a little more difficult to do that because your desk is in your living room,
Yeah, for sure. I've been there.
So I want to go on my computer maybe to check Facebook or to do something that to me feels like a break. But then I'm like, oh, well, I could be editing right now. And editing for me is something I enjoy, so it doesn't feel like work. But then my husband will say, hey, do you want to, go to bed soon? It's like midnight. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize. So just trying to figure out my rhythm for my creativity, which happens to be more that I like working in the evening more than in the morning. There's certain things I like doing in the morning, but I'm more of like an evening person.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like on Mondays, I like to make a list of everything I need to do for the week and see what I got to last week and what is coming up, and then try to work from there. So it's kind of something I'm still feeling out, but I think I'll eventually get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk more about that new journey. Mm-hmm. You call it the freelance experiment. Mm-hmm. You used to be what I like to call a captive agent. You worked for a organization. You've worked for a couple of colleges where they kind of control your life a little bit to an extreme, and you have to play along with the game. Tell us about that shift and what you're learning in that process.
Yeah, well, for the past 6 years, I've worked at a college creating videos. I knew that there were other things that I enjoyed doing, like graphic design, like photography. There were some times when they let me do those things for the job, but it was always a forced thing. It was always, we see you as this is what you were hired for, and we don't want you to stray from that box that we put you in. And so what I ended up doing, because that job was technically part-time, it was about 4 days a week, I ended up taking on a lot of side gigs and side hustles, as people call it.
Yeah.
And from that, I ended up just building my own portfolio and building this network of clients that I work with and different skills that I can do. Like I when I graduated college, knew that I wanted to be a teacher one day. I didn't know what that would look like, but I thought maybe I'll go back to school for my master's one day, or maybe in 10 years I'll have enough experience that I can be a teacher without a master's degree. And I find myself 10 years from graduation realizing that I am teaching. It's not exactly the way I thought it would be, but I am still teaching, and I did achieve that goal. And that just kind of happened because I had a little extra free time, and I have kind of a rebellious spirit. Okay. Where I like to say, well, I'm going to spend 4 days a week at this job that I don't like, but I'm going to make sure that on the days that I'm not at work, I'm doing things that I like to do. Like, you can't control my whole life, right? So I was making sure that I was getting teaching experience. I was getting photography experience, shooting events. I was making graphic design. I was doing some graphic design on the side. And I was building these skills, taking classes and doing things that made me feel good. And at the height of my career, I had got another job where I had a better title. I was getting paid way more. And it lasted about a month until I said, I can't do this anymore. I do not want to give a full-time schedule and all of my energy to a job that I don't like doing.
Let's talk about that for a second. A lot of people, I think, that may be listening can resonate with that. They can say, I'm in that job where I just feel like it's draining the life from me.
Yeah.
It's pulling everything out of me, and I can't be authentic to who I am or use my giftings or my passions. In that process for you, as you dove into that and you were introspective and you were asking the questions of like, what's going on? Why do I not feel right? Why am I so frustrated in this situation? In that process, as you walked through that, how did you make the decision to say enough's enough? Because I think a lot of people don't make that decision. And then how did you come up with a plan or go, what's the next step, and make that step forward?
For me, I realized that when I'm in highly stressful situations, is when I am the most introspective. A lot of people, they get very, or even myself before I realized a lot of the spiritual aspect of life, I used to just get very overwhelmed when there was something super stressful going on and I would not realize what's happening. But I like to now stop and say, okay, what's happening? Analyze it. What do I not like about this situation? How can I improve it? And so for me, the way I made the decision to leave that job was I kind of turned to spirituality, and it's kind of when I become the most spiritual is when I'm the most stressed out, and it's messed up, but it's like we're always like praying when we need something, but it was kind of that for me. It was, I need a change here, and what should I do? And just trusting that if I do make the leap and give up this thing that I thought I wanted, which was this higher title, this higher pay, I'm going to give up this thing that I thought I wanted and know that I'm going to land on my feet and I'm going to be okay. To just trust the universe, trust God, whatever it is that people trust in, that I'm going to be fine and that I'm a fighter and I can do this. And that was the first step for me, was that trust. And I'm lucky to have a husband that's very supportive, and that said, if you're not happy, then you got to do what you got to do, and not someone who was telling me, how could you give up all this money? Because that went through my head too. Oh my God, like my parents are going to freak out, because like that older generation, they just believe in, you need to make money and have benefits. And what are you going to do if you don't have health insurance and you don't have this and you don't have that? And so I freaked out a little bit, I'll admit, but I had to say, what is ultimately going to be the thing that makes me happy? And it's not money, because there is no correlation between happiness and money. But in terms of, for me, it was, I need time for self-care. I need time for myself. I need time to do the things that I like doing, and being able to work with clients directly and give them the things that they need that will also benefit me, because I love helping people.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I knew that I wanted to do. And just knowing that is what gave me the confidence to say, I'm just going to give this job up and I'll be okay, because I know I have skills that will carry me through.
Yeah, I think there's a couple good things in there that, I just want to really emphasize is, one, money makes things easier, not happier. And like, I think that's such a great point that you're making, is like you could have all the money in the world and still be miserable. Or you could be completely poor. You go to some of these third world countries or places that are incredibly broken, or even situations where there's significant loss, whether it's life or property or things like that. And you see people that respond and they're like, life is okay. Things are going to be good. And you look at that and you go, well, that's not a question of possession then. It's not a question of money. It's a question of attitude and who they are as they respond to it. So I think that's a really good point. And I think the second thing is that, that generational shift that you're talking about, like our parents' generation, where they're going, we got to have this stuff. We've got to have the benefits. We've got to have all these things.
And pension,
which, like we're going to be lucky enough to get that, right? But you look at it, we're like, I'm 36. I don't know how old you are.
31.
31. I think that we're in a space and time that it takes a lot of different faith to live. There's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And I think that frees you from a lot of expectations of what should or could or what you need to do. And our perspective's a little different in that shift.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of gratitude that went into my decision, was realizing all the things that I do have and all the things that are great about my life, and knowing that if I give up the job, I'm not giving up everything in my life.
Well, and I think right there, you've identified it. Your job isn't your identity. It's what you do.
Yeah.
And you can do it in different forms and facets. For you, you're doing a lot of the same things, just in a different stream. You're doing it as a freelancer, working directly with clients, being able to select who you work with and the projects you're passionate about, which is a powerful place to be.
Mm-hmm. It is.
So tell us about some of your projects. You are an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. You've won Tellys, you've won and been a part of several film festivals. You've worked on some really cool projects. I mean, all of those in a lot of ways are markers of success, depending on how you define success. Tell us about your projects, the kind of things you work on, the kind of things you're passionate about.
Sure. I always have multiple projects going at the same time.
I can relate to that.
Yeah. So my projects that are just mine and not for clients, something like my podcast, the Louder Vision podcast. I speak to creative people. We talk about kind of like what we're talking about now. So the process of being an artist and making money doing what you love. So I have a very strong opinion on that. And I believe that you should not have your passion as a side hustle. And I believe that you should just have a full-time, do what you got to do, do what you love.
Yeah.
And so I kind of speak to people who have made that happen, or people who are in that transitionary period, and people who can help other creative people become an entrepreneur, become an artist, because an artist is somewhat of a bad word, has a bad connotation to it, that we're irresponsible or we're not working as hard as other people. But that's not true. There's a lot more that goes into being an artist than just having fun. So just trying to break that stigma and talk about all the creative aspects of life. And that's my podcast. And you can listen to that at laurameoli.com/podcast.
It's really cool. I caught a couple of the episodes, and you have some interesting guests and great conversations through that. So
yeah. I like anything I do to be a learning experience. So everyone that's been on my podcast has been someone that I've hand selected to teach me something, something that I was curious about, something that I thought was interesting and that I can take from it. One of my recent guests was Squeaky Moore. She's an expert in pitching television series.
Okay.
And that relates to another project I was working on called Community TV, which is a TV comedy that I was working on for about 2 years. I was writing the series, writing the pilot, spent a lot of money and a lot of time on it. And I even took a class on how to pitch. And I spoke to Squeaky on my podcast about the process for it. And what I realized through not only speaking to her, but once I finished the podcast, once I finished writing the script, I finished shooting the teaser video for it. And it was time to then go out and be the pitching person, share that with people. That's when I realized that that's not something I like to do.
Yeah.
And so I feel like knowing what you don't like is just as important as knowing what you like. And so it may have taken 2 years of my life. It may have taken a lot of money, but I don't see it as a failure of any sort. And I know I'm painting this in a bad light right now, but I don't mean to. So I worked on the project Community TV for quite a while. I'm very happy with how it turned out, but I don't feel like I want to spend any more time being the pitching person, because I don't feel like that's authentic to who I am. So it is on the side burner right now. I know that pitching might take 5 more years, and that's not something I want to focus on right now. I might come back to it. I might not. But I'm really happy with how it turned out and happy to share it. So
that's really cool. In that process, there are tons of things that you learned. I mean, you're gaining skills and abilities.
Yeah.
You're gaining insights and experience that, just because something didn't work out the way you wanted to or the way you expected doesn't mean. We had a great guest on a couple months ago, and she was talking about redefining what failure and success mean, especially failure. And just talking about it as like failure is simply experiences that taught you a lesson. It's not a bad thing. It is a very good thing. Now, if you don't respond to that, if you don't learn from it, if you don't choose to engage with that, if you choose to be ashamed of that, then those are the places in which you stunt the growth that's possible from those things. And I think that's so important.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And defining success is something that I find so interesting because when I was working at that job I didn't like, and I was giving them so much of my time, all I wanted to do was write my screenplay, write my pilot, and work on this project because it was my escape from what I was doing and what I knew wasn't right for me. And for me at the time, success was, well, if my TV show gets picked up by Netflix or HBO and it becomes famous and I can leave this job. And that was kind of like always in the back of my head, like that's success, is like having a successful show and being able to leave this job because I'm so wanted by whatever, HBO or Netflix, for example. And then realizing that there's so much more that goes into it. And I don't really want to be that person. That's not who I identify as, and that's not who I want to be. And then once I was out of the situation with the job, I'm like, oh, that was just an escape and kind of like a wishful thinking dreamer thing.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, you mentioned I mentioned success. We talked about success a little bit. How can you as an individual define your own success and not, I think that as a society, we quantify what success is, whether that's through our personas on social media or what we perceive of others, whether that's through social norms of like you said, we've got to get the job with the pension, with healthcare and with all these things.
Or the glory. Yeah.
Or the title or whatever that looks like. How, as an individual, have you been able to step away from those things and define your own success and explore what that means to you?
It's been through gratitude, honestly. Just realizing the things that I have in my life that make me happy and knowing that happiness is success and not necessarily what other people see of me externally, because I'm not the type of person that likes to brag or talk. Like when you said I won an Emmy, I always turn red. I don't like.
Yeah,
it's just very weird for me. Like all that stuff is weird for me. So for me, the external views of success, like winning an award or doing something that other people might see as, oh, that's a great accomplishment. If you think that's great and that's success, then I'm happy for you. I'm glad that you think I'm successful. For me, what success is being able to have my own business, define my schedule, have time for self-care, have a family that I love, have people around me and be surrounded by people that I love being with and have time to enjoy them, and not this thing of, oh, I'm working so much and I'm constantly working and I hate this and I hate that. And just this happiness and this gratitude for my life, that to me is success.
Let's talk about, you mentioned in this process of doing CTV, community TV, writing the pilot, writing some of the scripts, preparing for that, you got to a point where you had to pitch and you found out pitching isn't what you're about. What type of projects do you really enjoy? I mean, in the space of filmmaking, there's ad work, there's documentaries, there are, your own shorts and feature films. In the space of podcasting, there's different styles. What are the kind of projects that you really resonate with as an individual that you just go, this is where I like to invest my passion, my heart, my time and energy into?
Well, I like to choose projects based on the impact that it might have. So something with a story that is important to tell, or something that's going to touch people or teach people something, those are the projects that I go towards, whether it's a fiction comedy or if it's a documentary. It really doesn't matter. And what I've learned from working with students, teaching them filmmaking, is that even the quality of the camera or the quality of the film the quality of the camera doesn't even make much of a difference. If you're telling a strong story, that's a successful film. Like I created a film with the Boys and Girls Club of New Rochelle where it was a bunch of 5th grade girls, and they had a bake sale so that they could send water filters to Flint, Michigan.
Oh, wow.
And they just inspired me a ton because I interviewed them and I said, what do you know about Flint, Michigan? First of all, some of them know way more than I do. And they're in 5th grade.
Wow.
So that was amazing. And then to hear how they felt about giving back to people and being able to help people that they've never met, that was a really touching experience for me. And we had just one DSLR camera. I let the kids shoot a lot of it. They were using very basic cameras. The stuff is shaky. It was not high quality, like super high quality in terms of like a film.
Yeah.
But the story is so powerful. And to me, that's a project that I want to work on. Doesn't matter the quality of the film, because I know when I work for my clients, the quality is going to be top notch, 100%. But it's not always the most important part of the story.
That's good. Yeah. I have a good friend who is a filmmaker out in California, and he always talks about how these are all just tools, whether you're shooting on a, $100,000 ARRI camera, or whether you're shooting on a DSLR, they're just a tool to create something. And what's more important is being able to create narrative, being able to create story, being able to accomplish the project objectives. And sometimes that needs to have, all the polish in the world, but a lot of times that just needs a lot more honesty and transparency. How do you approach your creative process in creating?
Well, I always try to take the perspective of the viewer. When I work with my clients, the first thing I ask is, who is this video for? Who's your audience? Just so that I can put myself in their shoes. What do I already know about this person versus what do I need to learn about them? So as that viewer perspective, I can then ask questions that are the very basic questions that are going to get all the information that we need. But then I allow myself the creative freedom to ask questions that I'm curious about, and those deeper questions. Like, I always like to put a personal twist on any video. I worked in corporate for a long time. We did a lot of very dry videos, but what everyone in my team knew about me was that I am always going to take the time to ask a personal question, even if it's like the dean of the school. I'm always going to ask a personal question, because those answers are the most interesting when it comes to a video. And that's always going to tie the video together and make it personal so that the audience is interested in it. So those personal questions are where I become the most creatively free and where I really start to enjoy the process. I worked on a video with this wine importer named Jose Mauro.
Yeah, it's a great piece. I saw it on your reel. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, he was a great person to meet right when I needed to meet him, because he inspired me so much about working for yourself and being an entrepreneur that it was just the perfect timing for me. But what I specifically remember from that interview was when I started asking him personal questions, he tied it into his business, because when you are an entrepreneur and your business is your life, essentially, you have to apply the same values that you have in your everyday life to your business. So for him, it was, he doesn't like working with people who are hard to work with. He likes to choose the people that he works with because it's going to be a long-term relationship. And I really took that to heart. And I use that now going forward, is if this person is showing me right off the bat that they don't value my work because maybe they're asking for me to do something for free, or they're not not understanding the amount of work that goes into it, if it's not something that we can talk about and work out, they're never going to respect the work that I do. And it's never going to be a relationship where it's going to create something beautiful.
Right.
Because that's the goal, is we want to make something beautiful, something meaningful for the client, so that it's helping them tell their story, helping them get more clients, helping them get more business. But also everything I do is a reflection of my business. So I always put 100% into everything I do, because it's not only a reflection of them and making them happy, but it also is something that is my work.
One of the spaces that you're really moving in towards is being an educator. You do one-on-one tutoring, you do group classes and training. A good educator is a consistent learner. Obviously, you do that a lot. You can hear it in how you talk and the stories you share. When you're conveying what you're teaching to your students, well, let me back up. Let me ask this question instead. Tell us a little bit about what you do as an educator with these one-on-one tutoring, who the people are that you're tutoring, who are the groups that you're working with, what are you helping them with, and what are you offering them?
Well, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. I teach everything from podcasting, filmmaking, writing, digital design, everything.
Okay.
I like to take all of the skills that I have, and if I know about something, I'm happy to teach it. That's what I do with my one-on-one tutoring students. I've had one student pretty consistently for the past year or so. She just likes to know everything about all different aspects of digital media. She's gained a lot of different skills that kind of are all going towards her being an art director. And I'm happy that I'm able to help her with those things and inspire her to find more resources. I am always encouraging my students to look up different courses, things like that. I'm not the one to say, I have to teach you or you can't learn. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So if I know that there's something on Coursera or something on Skillshare that would help them, I will suggest that for them. I've taught After Effects for specific projects. Like there was a high school student who needed some After Effects help. That was really fun to help him with. I just like being able to help my students achieve their goals, much like in my production company where I like to help my clients help them achieve their goals. It's the same for my students. Whatever it is that they want, whether it be a specific career objective that they have or to learn a skill to be able to be better at their art, I'm happy to teach those things. And in my group classes, I recently taught a class on podcasting at Rye TV, and there will be another one coming soon. And I'm teaching some documentary classes at the Pelham Picture House. One coming up I shouldn't say coming up. I'm teaching some documentary classes at the Pelham Picture House. And it's just really great to be able to share what I know with people who are interested in learning and exploring that space.
That's really cool. You also have a podcast, the Louder Vision podcast. Tell us about what it's about, who it's for, who's the audience, and what a listener may learn in that process.
The Louder Vision podcast is for creative people. It's for anyone who has a creative passion that they are possibly thinking of making it into a career, or maybe they want to keep it a side hustle. Like one of my recent interviews was with the DP cinematographer of Community TV, which is how I met him. But I interviewed him on the Louder Vision podcast, and we talked about the relationship between creativity and money, which is a huge theme of my podcast. So it was really interesting to speak to him about that, because there is kind of this disagreement with a lot of people. Do we want to entangle money in the things that we like doing? So if we're a painter, for example, do we want to sell our paintings, or do we just want to keep that to be for ourselves? So we spoke about that on the podcast, and a lot of my podcasts cover similar topics on how to sell your work, how to make money doing what you love. different aspects of film production, podcasting, any kind of art form, different aspects of that. Allowing ourselves to share that work with people, because for me that's the hardest aspect of being a creator.
Yeah.
Is sharing.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of fear around it. I mean, what
yeah.
if people don't like it? What if it doesn't sell? What if it's not good enough? What if I'm not good enough? How can people overcome that fear in that process of creating to say, no, there is value in what I'm doing? A couple years ago, we were working with an organization that does a lot of holistic living, alternative medicines, those kind of things. And it was so funny. I mean, it was when I lived in Northern California. It was the classic hippie kind of thing. Oh, just give it away. It's okay. The universe will get
You're
it back
artist.
to us. Yeah, it's not about. How can somebody effectively put a value on their work and overcome those fears of rejection or failure, or overcome the obstacles in that process?
I think it's about trusting the universe or trusting God, and knowing that whatever you have to offer is good enough, that you put your time and effort into this thing, and knowing that you're worthy and that your time is valuable, and pricing it accordingly. I mean, you want to know, in terms of your market, where you live, how much other artists charge for that thing, so that you can price it competitively. Or maybe you want to put yourself in a different bracket where you're saying, I'm only high end, and you're going to charge more. But if you undercharge and you undersell everything that you do, those are the kind of clients that you're going to attract.
Yeah.
Because the people that don't want to pay for your work are the people who are not going to respect your work, and they're not going to value what you do for them. And those are the people I don't like working with. And this is why I specifically charge a certain amount for certain things.
That's good. I can relate to that. And it's easy to be as a creative, somebody that wants to help, that wants to go out of their way, and those are
taken advantage of.
Dangerous places to be. Before we jump into our rapid fire questions, tell us how somebody can connect with you, how they can engage with you, whether it's hiring you as a filmmaker on their project, or whether it's to have you teach them, or even to listen to your podcast. How can people find you?
Sure. Well, it's all on my website, loudavision.com, LOUDAVISION.com. You'll find examples of my production company's work. My podcast is on there. Everything's there. My photography. I do lots of different things, and I'm happy to help.
That's awesome. We'll make sure to have those links on the episode notes too, so people can find you, and also on some social channels too that you're a part of. Let's jump into some rapid fire questions. These are questions I ask in every episode. They're questions that are big picture questions about life and about dreaming and ideas in general. What is one tip you would give someone with a big idea and dream? Maybe they don't know where to start. Maybe they're afraid to start, but what's one step they can take?
The step that they should take is to start. Because if you constantly put a conditional in front of it, is like, I need this amount of money before I can start my business, or I need this before that. If you do that, you're never going to start, because you have to do all these steps to get there. Just go to the thing that you want to do and the idea that you have, and just execute it. Quit your job.
And you can say that from
Basically
personal
what I'm
experience.
saying.
You've been there and done that. So it's not just some pie in the sky thing that people say. Some people just say that kind of thing, but you've actually done it.
Yeah, we are fighters. We don't realize it, but when the chips are down, when we need to work hard to get something done and roll up our sleeves, we're going to do it. So if you quit your job and you have no other source of income, that's when you're going to figure out what you need to figure out about your business.
No safety net.
Yeah, and not giving, this full-time job all of your time and energy, and then you don't have any time or creative energy to think about your business.
What's one change you'd like to see in the world?
I would like people to stop categorizing each other as a way of separating ourselves from other people, because we're all the same.
The next question is, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, I don't know. That's hard. I guess just knowing that I've helped people, that I've made people smile, that I've taught things to people, and that I've created things that are pretty.
That's awesome.
Pretty things.
Yeah. Who or what inspires you?
People that don't define themselves in a box of one thing, like someone like Jim Carrey or Chris Jericho, who's a wrestler, but people who say, you know, I'm this one thing, but I'm also good at this, and so I'm going to try this. So someone like Chris Jericho is a wrestler, he's a singer, he's a podcast host, he writes books, he does all these things. And that is inspiring to me because it makes me know that just because I am good at one thing doesn't mean I can't be good at something else.
You are a filmmaker, so I'm going to put emphasis on the second part of this question. What are you currently reading or specifically watching?
Okay. What I'm reading, because I think it's important, I'm reading a book on how to small talk in networking events.
Okay.
Because I know that it's something that I need help with. And then as I listen to it, I realize I have a lot of the skills because I interview people on my podcast. So as a podcast host, we already know how to small talk, but it's helping me a little bit with the confidence part of it, being able to approach people. What I'm watching, I just finished watching the new season of House of Cards.
Okay.
Which was awesome. I am watching the last season of Orphan Black. They're on their last season right now. I'm watching a lot of TV shows. I love TV series. I really do. What are you watching? I want to know what you're watching.
Yeah, that's a great question. When I'm working, I always have something on in the background, and it's usually things like Frasier or Taxi or Golden Girls, Imagine It or Not,
nice.
And things like that. Stitcher on Freeform is really kind of fun. It's lighthearted. It's pushing the limits of technology. It's some cool stuff there. The Ranch, surprisingly, with Ashton Kutcher on Netflix.
Wow.
Find that interesting. It goes back to something that's a little bit slower.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Did you see Minimalism on Netflix?
Yes. I love that.
I love that.
That's really
love it
good.
So much. Oh, Netflix, what would we do without you?
Probably actually go do something.
Well, so you don't do something. You should watch Wentworth on Netflix. It's a very good show.
I've not heard of that one.
It's like the Australian version of Orange is the New Black.
Okay.
It's really good.
I'm excited about Psych coming up, actually, too.
Psych, the TV show?
They have a new movie coming out in December.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
What's your favorite movie?
This is completely a not epic. It's not epic from the standpoint of great cinematography, although it was very bleeding edge when it was done. It's not like the best script ever, although it's a great script, but the Bourne series.
Oh, I like those movies too.
Yeah, it's not like you're not going to say it's not like a Field of Dreams or, some kind of classic like Gone with the Wind or something like that.
You don't have to defend the Bourne series. The Bourne series is high quality. Yeah, the editing is really cool in that movie.
Yeah, and that was like the first time that people really were okay with the shaky cam kind of movements and things like that.
It definitely defined a style.
Yeah.
Sure.
I've been really into Elementary.
Okay. Is that good?
I like it.
Okay.
I'm a big
Sherlock. I watched Sherlock.
Yeah, I like Sherlock too. It's just the problem with that is you get one episode every 2 years.
I know. But it's worth it.
Chef's Table, really big into the Chef's Table stuff. And then I guess a good documentary that I watched that is very pop culture, Avatar Game Over.
I'm writing this down.
Yeah, it's about kind of the downfall of Avatar, pop culture, video games. I'm not a heavy gamer, but it was really cool. So those are some of the things I've watched.
Cool.
Now, I've got to ask this.
Okay.
You're New York, Manhattan, New York City adjacent. You're right in that space. Where, if somebody's going to New York City, do they need to go?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that the Bronx Zoo is highly underrated. I really like the Bronx Zoo. I also like the Bronx Botanical Gardens.
Okay.
Which is very close by. I wouldn't do them both in the same day because your feet are going to hurt. But I grew up in the Bronx, so I believe that the Bronx has a lot of great hidden gems of New York. I believe New York City, Manhattan is a little overrated, but there are some cool places to go. And I live in Westchester now, so I actually like being out of the city.
Okay. Yeah. Every episode I end with this final question. What is one dream you are still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Well, I've always had this goal of mine to write a book one day.
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm going to go that route, but I like to explore different mediums and different forms of art. So I might possibly, I'm going to say might possibly make a book version of my podcast based on
cool.
the interviews that I've done.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love it.
Thank you. Well, I might possibly. I don't put it out there unless
Asterisk,
I'm sure.
Right? Asterisk right there.
Unless I'm like absolutely sure, but this might be the next thing that I try and see if I like it.
Well, Laura, it's been a lot of fun hearing about your journey, hearing your story, and getting the insights that you have from the different experiences you have. Thanks for taking time to chat with us today.
Thank you so much. It's been really good talking to you.
Once again, I want to thank today's guest, Laura Meoli, for sharing about her journey and what she's creating. It's really a lot of fun. Swing on over to jumblethink.com and check out the episode notes where you can find links to Laura's website and to her social channels. On Monday's episode, we have PJ Jonas. She is a business owner, goat wrangler, entrepreneur, mom, and so much more. She started a company called Goat Milk Stuff. It's been featured on the Today Show, The Doctors, The Huckabee Show, the Oprah Magazine, and so many other incredible places. In the episode, PJ shares about the importance of faith and family and starting a multi-generational business. Make sure to check out this power-packed episode this coming Monday. Do you like hearing the stories we share from amazing dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers? I know I do. And you never want to miss another episode. The best way to do that is to subscribe wherever you like listening to podcasts. Now, that could be on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, YouTube, and so many other great places. So go on over, make sure you find Jumblethink, and subscribe so you never miss another episode. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that this episode has encouraged you on your journey to chase your big idea and dream and create the world you want to live in.
Les enfants peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois. Lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.